This law seeks to permit the incarceration and imprisonment of people, including American citizens here, indefinitely and without any charges being filed. Remember, it's part of the incremental and deliberate dissolution of criminal due process and constitutional law protections under the increasingly insidious war on terror, the magic incantation that turns your brain off. It's called the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2012. It will give any president the authority to indefinitely imprison you without being charged and without a trial, both in foreign countries and here. If enacted, Sections 1031 and 1032 of the NDAA would do three things. And listen. 1, it would authorize the federal government to indefinitely imprison you without charges and without a trial inside and outside of these United States. 2, it would mandate the military detention of some civilians, Americans who would not usually be subject to military jurisdiction, including American civilians like you, picked up within the United States itself. And 3, the law would transfer to the Department of Defense all powers and jurisdiction now held by the Department of Justice for prosecution, investigation, law enforcement, as well as incarceration and imprisonment. Imagine you're being picked up here or in London or Toronto, thrown into a military prison and held indefinitely. That's what this law is all about. Senator Lindsey Graham emphasized that the homeland is now part of the battlefield. We didn't know each other in 2002, but I was warning talk radio sheeple about that guy Jose Padilla, an American citizen, Brooklyn-born no less. Jose Padilla was arrested in Chicago and immediately labeled an enemy combatant. Remember that? Then he was held for 3.5 years somewhere. No charges, no bond, no lawyer, no nothing. And he went crazy. Finally, they had a change of heart and sentenced him to 17 years in Supermax. And when the ridiculous argument went back and forth about how he was not entitled to a civilian trial but a military tribunal, I warned then that that was a beta test. And I was right. Now it's happening. They're going to do this to us here and now. The Constitution is being destroyed. So wake up.
Yeah, you heard the man. Wake up. Well, with the signing of the National Defense Authorization Act, we have been ushered into a closed dynamic. The homeland is the old battlefield of mind control, and gross manipulation now turned into improved battlefield of physical restraint. Now, I know some of you will say, as long as you have nothing to hide, then there should be no concern. Or, if you are not a bad guy, then you should not be directly impacted. I say, when the voice of the people is openly diminished via rule of law and fear, then overt control is sure to follow. Fear-mongering is not my style, and if you think that's what I'm doing, then please go elsewhere. However, this is a good time to be even more grateful for the remaining illusions of freedom that dangles in front of us all. You gotta love corporate influence. I do not know about you, but I am tired of some of the meaningless dribble people get so worked up over on YouTube and elsewhere in life. Yet, these are the same folk that invest little to no time on meaningful concerns. Yes, I know. What one deems as meaningful is a subjective matter. I get that. But this mixture of apathy and poorly invested time does not cut it for me. Yes, I know what one deems as meaningful is subjective. But isn't it funny that both parties supported this bill, yet you staunch Republicans and Democrats are willing to support your masters? What happened to discernment, piercing observation, and meaningful conversation or debate? The us versus them dynamic has been blatantly turned against the people. What it comes down to is this. If you dissent in any capacity, you are a potential enemy. My questions are, where within have we made it okay to be submissive to a power that cares not for our welfare? When did you convince yourself it was a responsible act to surrender your mind? How is it possible to fall for the media propaganda when you have seen similar activity in the past? What does civil liberties mean to you? Where are all the people who are concerned about human rights? It appears that within the minds of many there is no non-negotiable demands for human dignity. The fact remains that no matter how you slice it or dice it, the current American behavioral model is at war with the values that America once advocated. This act is a crime against humanity, yet most are content to watch their sports as something is dangerously afoot. Has our basic human instincts been desensitized? I think so. It appears our reactions, not emotional reasoning or cognitive distortions, but our rationale has been manipulated. I suspect that for some, this is too incredible to accept. Discrimination, is not solely a word that applies to issues of race. It is a cognitive process where multiple stimuli is distinguished. This process is needed to choose between feasible options. We can bitch and moan when religious men and women forcibly insert themselves into our daily lives. We can bitch and moan about drama, meaningless drama on YouTube and throughout the country. But there's nothing more than a whimper when it comes to this. I used to believe that if people became aware of what they do not know, they will not remain captive to a mindset that enabled this police state. And I'm not just talking about a police state as we understand it, but an internal police state that we have been oh so ready to support, that keeps us on lockdown, that keeps us pacified. Now, I see that my former words were more correct. And that is, there is more to life than constantly being swindled, hoodwinked, and manipulated. It is noted that many will never show concern for topics pertaining to various levels of freedom as long as they are fed, watered, clothed, and their facade remains manicured. I don't know about you, but I want more. We all deserve more. And I'm not speaking about materialism. I'm speaking about peace of mind and the ability to live our lives without being engrossed in fear. Don't waste your opportunity to act. Don't waste your opportunity to think. Don't waste your opportunity to make a difference. Thank you for your time.
All right, folks, there is a lot going on right now. Decisions being made that are unprecedented and will have an overreaching impact on what it means to live in the United States of America. Also, Congress, your elected officials, both the Senate and the House of Representatives, have just overwhelmingly passed the National Defense Authorization Act. Now, this is not just funding for the Pentagon that's included in this bill. This legislation also has two provisions that give more power to the military and to the government, and so massively alter the Constitution that it's almost laughable, or at least it was laughable when President Obama said he would veto the bill. Now it turns out he won't. So here's what's squeezed into this military fund. Not just money, but lots and lots of power. First, a provision that expands the use of military force in Afghanistan to include indefinite detention of anyone suspected of being a member of Al-Qaeda or, quote, associated forces. So anyone. But here's the big one, folks. It gives the military the power to indefinitely detain American citizens, even those captured here in the United States, suspected, just suspected, not convicted, of some sort of involvement or affiliation with terrorism. So no trial, prison based solely on suspicion. The Fourth Amendment, out the window. As you may be able to tell, I think this is kind of a big deal, but I'm not the only one. Jason Leopold is the deputy managing editor of truthout.org. He is in our Los Angeles studio. Jason, I know you wrote an article titled Obama's Twisted Version of American Exceptionalism, detailing some of the ironies here. You're pretty outraged, but a lot of Americans not so shocked about this, don't really realize what's going on. What do you think are some of the biggest things that are being ignored right now?
Well, the biggest thing that's being ignored is exactly how this bill would apply to U.S. citizens. Now, we've heard from various members of Congress, Carl Levin, who is the chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, who worked on this bill with Senator John McCain. We've received assurances from various lawmakers that U.S. citizens would not be affected by this, that it would not apply to this. However, immediately after the bill was passed, Senator Dianne Feinstein introduced legislation referred to as the Due Process Act of 2011. And what that would do is ensure that this particular bill, more or less, would not apply to U.S. citizens. Basically, that indefinite detention of U.S. citizens would not happen unless there was an express act of Congress, and that's what her legislation says. It's very short, and it's proposed at this point, but it seems to be a protection that was introduced because there's so much murkiness and with the National Defense Authorization Act. So there are many people right now that are defending the bill, and what they're truly defending is President Obama. That's what this comes down to. They're defending him. They're defending the fact that he had caved in on the promise to veto it simply because Congress made minor changes to the legislation. And so the outrage is somewhat being limited to just people who feel that the bill would actually just affect U.S. citizens. But again, there's a bigger picture here, and that's the indefinite detention of people in general without giving them the opportunity to hear what the charge is.
Yeah, and a couple things that you said here, Jason. I mean, first of all, President Obama originally did say that he would veto this. It was sort of because it didn't give the White House and his administration enough power. I think there's a little bit of politics involved here, too, because if you look, this bill passed in the Senate, I think it was 93-7, and in the House, 200 and something to 100 something. I don't know, I haven't done the math totally, but it seems to me that even if the president said he would veto this, that this could get overturned by a 2/3 majority. Not sure about that yet. This could be politics as well. So let's talk about Obama's rule. I know a number of people had pointed this out. I know you did as well. Something that is clear as day. This was articulated by President Obama in a proclamation commemorating the 63rd anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The president said, quote, "All people should live free from the threat of extrajudicial killing, torture, oppression, and discrimination, regardless of gender, race, religion, nationality, sexual orientation, physical or mental disability." All right, so Jason, give me some examples, some ways in which the president and his administration have blatantly gone against this.
Well, this was the basis of the report I put together yesterday prior to the passage by the Senate of the bill and of the National Defense Authorization Act. And what I really want to point out here and articulate to people is that indefinite detention is a human rights issue. It has not been spoken about in those terms. It's not just a civil liberties issue, and this is not just about whether this bill applies to U.S. citizens. Okay, this is a human rights issue.